Well, Corey, I know that you were a former athlete, and a lot of times you don't see athletes necessarily make that transition to politics. So I'm curious to know what was the spark for you that got you interested in going down this path?
I was raised to revere athletes from Arthur Ashe to Muhammad Ali. You and I are here because of athletes that show the kind of spirit that you're showing, that understand that their artistry and their genius is for the greater good. And living in a nation that's still struggling to achieve itself, that's still fighting to give more people opportunity, I just think athletes have a tremendous power. And I'll never forget playing football at Stanford, the first time I wore my jersey out into a low-income community near the campus in East Palo Alto area, and the impact it had on young people. So I think from an early age, I knew football was going to be my ticket, but not my destination, that the larger mission of my life was trying to help people. And I'm grateful for what athletics gave me. And I think that there's a natural connection between trying to make a difference in the world and advancing the gifts God gave you to put you in a position to make a difference, even a bigger position to make a difference.
Yeah, no doubt. I think a lot of times in the NBA, you get asked the question, who's your favorite player, or who do you try to model your game after? So for you, in terms of, politics, like who are some of your political heroes or mentors that, you try to draw from or emulate?
Look, I'm in Newark right now where I live, but if we were in my office in DC, you would see Frederick Douglass, Martin Luther King, Gandhi, Harriet Tubman. She's my all-time sort of hero. These are the people whose biographies I devour and who I am inspired by. And I know that I'm an elected representative, but we all are involved in politics. And sometimes we don't know it. And that in and of itself is a political statement. It's basically saying, I surrender to others to help decide what is going to make a difference in my life. So I think we all are involved in leadership. And whether it's leading by omission or commission, that's the question, is how we're going to lead. And the heroes I have, I love Martin Luther King, where he said, what we have to repent for in this day and age, he says, is not just the vitriolic words and violent actions of the bad people. It's the appalling silence and inaction of the good people. And so I feel blessed that I'm in an elected position, but the reality is, from the time I was in my late teens, I had parents that, my dad would look at my brother and I, and just, when we were growing up, so they'd be like, boy, don't walk around this house like you get a triple. You were born on third base. So much struggle had to go in to get you where you are. You better take all this privilege you got and pay it forward. And so, elected office or not, I'm in this world to try to do what people did for me, advance the baton down the track and hand it to somebody else.
No, I definitely can identify with that. And I want to talk about, since you brought that up, advancing the baton, the American Rescue Plan. For those that, aren't familiar with that, it's $1 trillion benefits package designed to help Americans financially as we're hopefully, coming out of this pandemic. I'm a big strategy guy. So when I see something like this, I'm really curious what it takes politically to get something like this done.
So folks, I think we throw around numbers now, trillion, billions, 100 billion. We don't, sometimes the numbers just now washed over us. But think about this. When Barack Obama took over as president, we were in a global recession that was really impacting working class, middle class, low-income people. And he passed a bill that was 1/3 the size of what Joe Biden just did. This is the biggest spending bill, one of the biggest spending bills in the history of the country, and 3 times the size of what Obama did when he got in. And what's powerful about it, unlike what Trump did, he did a very big tax plan when he came in, but over 60% of it went to the top, like 1% or 10%, top, at least the top quintile. This one is going overwhelming majority, middle class, working class, low income people. And so every American is going to be affected by this to the tune of thousands of dollars in their bank account. If you're sitting there thinking, well, what's it done for me? You're probably missing out because there's something in this bill that you should have gotten, from a $1,400 check all the way to expansions in the earned income tax credit and the child tax credit. I just came from a hospital that not only were the employees thankful to me, but they knew a lot of the resources went to giving them. I flew for one of the first times since the pandemic. I fell asleep, sitting there probably drooling on my neighbor. And I woke up and a flight attendant hands me a card. Now I have this memory of being, young, handsome with a beautiful afro. But so I thought, oh, she's giving me a card here. What's going on here? And then I read it, and it is actually her, and all the flight attendants signed it to say thank you for saving our jobs through the American Rescue Plan. So this is one of the more exciting pieces of legislation, if not the most exciting piece of legislation in our lifetime, unless you are like 70, 80 years old, going back to the civil rights era. There's so much in this bill.
And I know there's so much in it, but if you could just break down, the ARP for me a little bit, what is included in it, who qualifies, and how do you access it?
So, I mean, this is like I'm trying to become a sort of a preacher on the child tax credit. I want to go and be a revivalist and preach the gospel of the child tax credit, because it's not sexy. I wish it had a better name, but 90% of the families with children in America are going to be affected by what we did in the Congress, but Joe Biden signed. And what is the child tax credit? So if you have children, your tax credit is going to increase by roughly $1,000 to almost $1,600 more per child for the year. And so that means that you will get, if you have 3 kids, you could get $3,000 to $5,000 pretty much more in your family's income. And most families will receive that. And what's got me even more exciting is that you don't even have to hit a certain income gap. Like we've seen in the past how the child tax credit, the way it was formed, a lot of people on the lower earning end didn't really qualify for the full tax credit. This one is something they call in Washington speak fully refundable. And what that really means is you don't have to do anything. You're just going to get per child. If it's young children, you will get $3,600 per child. If it's older kids from 7 to, I think about 18, you're going to get about, or 7 to 17, I think if I have it correct, you're going to get $3,000 per child, and it's going to come to you monthly. So you're going to get monthly checks at $300, $250 to $300. And the great thing is, if you don't know about it, just remember simply this: the one word, child tax credit, put it all together, .gov, childtaxcredit.gov, to get the money you need. Now, if you filed your taxes already, you're probably going to automatically get it, but go to childtaxcredit.gov and get your money.
I mean, this to me feels like direct relief for American families. Do you believe that putting dollars directly into the hands of American citizens is something that you think the government should continue to do moving forward?
Well, I look, I don't care. Philosophy, let's put our philosophies aside. Let's just talk facts. So when children are growing up in financially secure households, they do better. So let me give you an example. If a child is in poverty, and we have one of the worst child poverty rates in all developed nations, all industrial nations, America does. The wealthiest nation on the planet, more poor children per capita than most ones. So if you take a kid from below the poverty line with something like the child tax credit and get them above the poverty line, and this Biden bill is going to cut child poverty in half, those kids that go above the poverty line, listen to what happens. They are less likely to get in trouble with the police. They are less likely they will have less medical expenses. But the big one is when you get people out of financial insecurity, their life blossoms. These children will have higher lifetime earnings. And so it actually means every dollar that we as taxpayers invest in giving families enough money to hit a certain floor, we get back in either taxes not spent, like medical costs, or in taxes received by expanded earnings, we get about $7 back. So forget your philosophy for a second. If I told you you could invest $1 and get $7 back, there's not a person on Wall Street that would dive at that chance. But we as society don't understand the most valuable natural resource we have to invest in is our children. And if you invest in a child, you expand infinitely the possibilities for everybody. So it is a financial deal, but more importantly, poverty for children is a moral obscenity. And so this is a very powerful investment that we are making in ourselves as a country to try to catch up to other societies that are out investing in their children. Let me tell you right now, this is what I get angry about. We are a nation that has, amongst all other wealthy nations in the country, from Canada to England to Germany to Japan, we have some of the highest child poverty rates, the highest infant mortality rates, the highest maternal mortality rates. We're one of the few nations that doesn't have paid family leave. Afghanistan and the Congo have paid family leave. We're one of the few nations that doesn't have universal preschool. Heck, in most states in America, quality childcare costs more than college tuition. So we don't have universally available childcare. We seem to think as a society we could starve children, not invest in them in those first 6 years where 90% of their brain development happens. So they have more medical complications when they're born, more challenges in those early years, less education in those early years, like preschool and childcare. And somehow we think we're going to compete in a 21st century knowledge-based economy with other countries that better cultivate their genius, their blessings, their kids. America used to be, in my father's era, the top at all the lists of investing in children, investing in education, lowering child poverty rates. But something happened around the 80s where we stopped and started falling in relation to our peers about caring about our kids in relation to other countries. So I'm fired up about that. I along with in the Senate, along with these two other great guys, killer bees, Senator Bennett from Colorado, Senator Brown from Ohio, we've been pushing this child tax credit along with somebody named Kamala Harris, who used to be our colleagues. Then she left us to hang out with Joe Biden. The four of us were pushing this idea of let's expand direct payments to families with children in America to give them the platform, the foundation for them to reach for their dreams. I'm sorry to get you triggered me there, man. I got me a little hot.
Nah, Cory, you're preaching right now. You're preaching. It's all good. I want to shift gears a little bit, though. If anyone that knows me knows I'm passionate about social justice. And I know that you've done a great deal of work focusing on mass incarceration, the criminal justice system. And I think that the more that you work in these spaces, you read, you educate yourself, you see the role that systemic racism plays in our society, but especially, in those systems. Even with all that being said, there's still some people who don't believe that racism exists or believes that we're well beyond that. What do you say to those people?
Well, look, we need each other in America more than we know. Racism is not a black thing versus a white black thing versus about black people versus white people. This is about all of us. You cannot live in a society, an integrated, interdependent society, and have some people receive less justice, less opportunity, consciously or unconsciously, and think the society as a whole is going to flourish. We need each other all to have abundant opportunity, justice, and equality. Now, let me just give you facts. For people that think that systemic racism does not exist. I'm a kid that grew up in fact, my family had to get a white family opposes them in 1969 to buy the house I grew up in. So we grew up in a very privileged era, and I watched people in my first 20 years, whether in high school, college, graduate school, watch people experimenting with drugs. There's no difference in America between blacks and whites for using marijuana, for example. But black people are 4 times more likely to be arrested for it. And I know people probably think, well, we don't arrest people for pot anymore. Wrong. In 2019, last year I saw records for, there were more marijuana arrests, most of it for possession, than all violent crime arrests combined. So we are living in America right now where there are people with criminal convictions for doing things that 2 of the last 4 presidents admitted to doing, and they are disproportionately Black and brown. And if you are in America and you have a criminal conviction on a marijuana charge, the American Bar Association says you have 40,000 collateral consequences, 40,000 things that make it more difficult for you in life. Can't get a job, can't get a business license, can't get a loan from the bank. Just think about this for a second. Blacks 4 times more likely to be arrested for something that they do equally with whites. And what that does to a Black family economically is like putting economic handcuffs on them forever. It's a lifetime sentence. And that has a powerful impact on wealth in the Black community. It's yet one example of why we have a nation where the average white family has 10 times the wealth of the average Black family. But this is the thing. People might say, okay, well, that's tough for Black folks. No, it's actually tough for us all. McKinsey, this big consulting company, said, well, if we corrected that wealth imbalance, not taking away from this person, giving this person, but helping to have justice and economic opportunity for Blacks, we would increase our overall economy by $1.5 to $2 trillion. That means it wouldn't be addition or subtraction, it would be multiplication and blowing up our economy. Racism is too expensive. It hurts us all. And we have to do something about it when it is objectively looking at the data, a problem. And one more example, forgive me, but I talked before about infant mortality rates and maternal mortality rates. We know that even when you control for income and education level, Black women are more than 3 times likely to die in childbirth than white women. Now, I know a lot of people, again, are going to say that's terrible for those Black women. God, we are all in this together.
Absolutely. Just
if you look at the financial costs of women who get ill or die or low birth weight babies, the financial cost of that alone is cheap. In my opinion, it's cheaper to provide doula care for all women to ensure their safety and the health of their children in terms of the benefit we would get back. So we've got to stop getting into a defensive crouch. We've got to stop getting into a defensive crouch about the issue of racism. The question should not be, does racism exist? The question should not be, am I a racist or not? The question is, what am I doing about creating a nation that is more equal so we all can thrive? Because if my neighbor, whether it's because they're a woman, women earn a fraction of men, whether it's because my neighbor is LGBTQ, their child is more, LGBTQ child is more likely to commit suicide, miss school because of fear, whether it's because my neighbor wears a hijab, we may see the otherization, they're an other. That is one of the more toxic things in the world. We are one nation, one people, one destiny. And all of this injustice in our country is tearing us apart. But this is the beautiful thing. When we find a way to come together, we have shown that humanity to sit back and watch what America can do. Like when we brought Hidden Figures, those Black women, to the same table as NASA astronauts, we literally are defying gravity. We are the best when we overcome these things and create diverse teams. And again, everybody from Harvard Business School to McKinsey has shown studies that diverse teams working on equal platforms to a common goal are more powerful than homogeneous teams that might for some reason be locking out diversity.
Absolutely. Cory, you're one of the senators advocating for marijuana reform, both medically and recreationally. As marijuana is legalized across the country, what does restorative justice look like for the hundreds of thousands of Americans who are currently incarcerated on nonviolent drug charges?
Yeah, so don't be somebody that's just, oh, I'm so happy marijuana is legal. I mean, honestly, that is not enough. When you've had generations of a drug war, which was not a war on drugs, it was a war on people, and not just all people, it was a war particularly on Black and brown people, low-income people, The marijuana war disproportionately affected veterans. It disproportionately affected women. This has been the targeting of disadvantaged people, marginalized people. And you can't just suddenly say, I'm legalizing marijuana, the problem's over. You need to do something about that harm and that injury. And that's why I say none of us should talk about legalizing marijuana without somewhere in the same paragraph talking about expunging people's records. And then the second thing, we are, it's about the dollars often. We should be telling our local communities, our states, or the federal government, like I'm advocating for, that, hey, there will be billions of dollars of tax money created. We should take that tax money and invest it in the communities that have been disproportionately targeted by the drug crime. And then we should also say, wait a minute, all these African Americans disproportionately, all these low income, there's so many people that were disproportionately targeted by the drug war who now can't get a business license. And there's going to be, again, billions of dollars of business opportunity created. We need to do something to make sure that the opportunities for economic empowerment, remember I told you before, the data that shows there's been a lot of economic disempowerment. Now we should look for opportunities to expand business opportunities for everyone. So years ago, I put a bill into the Senate called the Marijuana Justice Act to address all of these things. But now, and people laughed at me just for talking about legalizing marijuana, but now that the world has caught up, I don't want it to just be about legalization. I want it to be about the larger picture, which you asked and which I talked about, in restorative justice.
Absolutely. Absolutely. During the pandemic, during the election, there was a huge rise in voter awareness. At the same time, we're seeing politicians, special interest groups that are actively working to make voting more difficult. How do you see these tactics taking place, and how do you combat voter suppression?
I mean, we're at a crossroads for America. Will we be a robust democracy that is inclusive, that celebrates voting, or will we be a nation that moves towards authoritarianism, where people in power change the rules to make it harder for there to be a free democracy, harder for people to vote, and to protect their power? Now, all these laws being passed around the country, why? And we should really ask ourselves why. We just had a nation where Republican leaders from the administration on the federal level all the way down to states like Georgia were saying this election was the fairest there ever was. There was no major problem. And now suddenly people are passing a lot of laws that will make it harder for people to vote. Why? The chances of there being in-person voter fraud in America, there has been a handful of cases in the billions of votes cast over the last few decades. There's been only a handful of cases of ever proven in-person voter fraud. It's very hard to do and very easy to catch. But yet we are passing all of these laws to make something more difficult that will ultimately restrict access to voting, and being done in a way that's appalling. Like, you can't bring water to pump somebody waiting online. Like, you could use your gun permit, but you can't use your student ID at the state university. These are laws being designed to target certain people that these Republican legislatures think are more likely to vote Democrat. Young people, poor people, people of color. And so I served with John Lewis and a lot of these heroes that literally were on the front lines of the fight for voting rights. And what pains me about John Lewis's life, one of my greatest heroes, was that he lived to see that all the work that he worked to advance was being stripped away by people under the auspices of a lie, that we have voting, in-person voter fraud all over this country. And I think all of us need to do something about it. Now, what can we do? Number one, vote. They're trying to take away your vote. That shows you how valuable it is. And support efforts going on at the federal government level, state government level, to fight these tactics or pass laws to make voting easier and not harder.
No doubt about that. You were at the Capitol building on January 6th during a violent insurrection that took place just a few weeks before a historic inauguration. Watching it live on television, it looked like chaos. It looked completely insane. But can you tell us a little bit what it was like that day from the inside? And do you think it brought senators with differing politics and views together at all?
Look, it was one of the most shameful days in American history. Only once before was our capital successfully taken, and that was in the War of 1812, around 1814 to be exact. But this wasn't taken by the British. This was more, to me, of a lot of those same forces that turned their treasonous weapons against America back in the Civil War. When I was on the Senate floor, and the vice president was hustled out to safety, but eventually they got all 50 senators out. As we're going along these corridors to an undisclosed location, we are seeing injured officers on the way. And then when I finally got back to a TV set and I saw the Confederate flag being waved around the Senate chamber, the sense of historical shame that the bloodiest war in American history, under that battle flag, where people took up arms against their own country, against the United States of America, in a treasonous, treacherous attempt to advance white supremacy, that all of that bloodshed to prevent that flag from waving in the Capitol, that flag was now being waved there cavalierly, along with other racist and anti-Semitic chants and slogans and symbols. So there's a wound, and not just in my heart, but another scar on the story of America. And the question isn't about its happening. The question is what do we do in response? You're not defined by what happens to you as an individual, as a nation. You're defined by how you respond to it. And I was stunned when my Republican colleagues didn't even want to come together like we did after 9/11 and say, let's put a joint bipartisan commission to study this. That was another sort of disappointment to me. But I'm confident that this conflict between truth and lies, between hate and love, between the highest ideals of our country and the darkest chapters of our nation, this conflict will continue in the weeks and months ahead. And again, there are no bystanders. We all are going to have to enter this conversation and speak, because if not, we could have more dark or darker days ahead of us.
For sure. I've spoken to young people who are frustrated that their representatives are out of touch. We have congressmen and women who are in their 80s or who are serving, their 40th year in office. There's obviously rules about how many times, you can run for president. But do you think there should be the same for other elected offices?
There are a lot of reforms I would want to see in our democracy. Term limits is not at the top of my list. Getting dark money out of politics. I'm only the fourth senator to ever say that I don't want to take any corporate PAC contributions, any C-suite pharma money. So like dark money would be one of the first things I'd want to, and campaign finance reform would be one of the things. Gerrymandering, people designing this district where you have politicians who pick their electorates instead of electors picking their politicians. That would be high on my list. Voting rights, we've already talked about. So there's a lot of things that before you even get to gerrymandering, what I be concerned with. As one of these young people, I beat a guy when I first ran for office who was 40 years older than me. People said it couldn't be done. What we do need is just more young people running for office and being willing to take on folks who may have gotten tired and comfortable and are trying to do things with the rules to make it harder to challenge them. Let's fight it to make it a fairer system, because there are some people that have been around for a long time that I sit around a table of Congressional Black Caucus and I see people like John Lewis, Maxine Water. I can go through them. I'm not ready to throw folk like that out. But so I don't think age is an indicator, or how long they've been in office, of whether they're good or not. I think the electorate should decide that. And if you could deal something with the dark money and the gerrymandering and the voter restrictions, just make it more of a fair playing field, more competitive elections. Those are the things I would want to deal with first.
That makes sense. And that kind of goes into my last question. Because I know this interview is going long. I know you have a lot of things to do today, but if there was one thing that you could snap your fingers today and get one policy passed, what would it be?
Look, it wouldn't be a policy, but I wish I could snap my fingers and do something. Look, you fight things out in the political sphere. I'm proud that today we got passed in the Senate a bill that I wrote with Ed Markey to make Juneteenth a federal holiday. We got that done today. I'm excited about it. But I will tell you this: change does not come to Washington. It doesn't come from Washington. It comes to Washington. In other words, the civil rights movement, suffrage, all of those things happened because people demanded it. And so I just know when folk are focused and determined, that things change a lot quicker. And there's all these distractions around us that numb us to the suffering of others, make us more self-absorbed than driven by a more courageous empathy. I just hope that somehow we in this our nation, we're at our best when we activate our moral imagination about who we really could be, that we don't surrender to cynicism or let apathy sink in, that we just become more active in being agents of light in a still dark world. So I've any chance I have to ask people to recognize their power, because the most common way people give up their power is not realizing they have it. There's somebody in your life that could benefit from the child tax credit. And now you know, if you listen to this, childtaxcredit.gov, what do you do with that information? Do you sit on it, or do you post it on your internet platform? So you help one mom struggling with two kids get $3,600 for their family. You may have made a difference in a child's life that you don't even know, but you made a difference. Every day you have the power to make a difference in people's lives, and the only thing stopping us is us. So I'm going to continue to fight it out in Washington. But the times that things change the quickest is when people are constantly asking themselves, how do I make this nation better? How do I use the power I have to make people's lives better? How do I love more boldly and unapologetically and more radically in my life?
No, Cory, I mean, I think that's powerful. And I just want to thank you for not only the work that you're doing that we can see, but all the work behind the scenes that we don't see to get legislation passed and to have our voices heard. So thank you for the time. My last thing, if anyone wants to follow the work that you're doing, I know you just shout out a website link. Is there anywhere else we can go to just follow the work that you're doing right now?
From Instagram to Facebook, I'm Cory Booker. You can follow me there. We push a lot of information out. So hopefully you'll consider following me, Cory Booker. But right now, childtaxcredit.gov, proselytize with me the gospel of get money in people's pockets. So thank you, man. I really appreciate you giving me this time to talk.
Absolutely, man. Thanks, and we'll be in touch.
All right. Bye-bye now.